gentlemen. Welcome to Motherwell Library. This is our first Encounters event in Motherwell, our first author event anyway. Before I introduce tonight's guests, I would like to outline some housekeeping matters very briefly. Toilets are over by the counter, as I'm sure all locals know. There's no fire alarm scheduled for tonight, so if it does go off, follow the staff, and the muster point is even strict. I'm really delighted tonight and very honoured that we can welcome author and journalist Val McDermid and her interviewer Stuart Kelly to Motherwell Library. They're both literary greats. Val will be very well known as one of the biggest names in crime writing, and I don't really think I need to tell you very much, but I'll give a brief introduction. She's got many notable characters: journalist Lindsay Gordon, private investigator Craig Brannigan, and psychologist Tony Hill. She has won a huge plethora of awards and been shortlisted over the past 30 odd years. I'm not going to list them all, but to give you a flavour: Crime Writers Association Gold Dagger Award, 1998 the W.H. Smith Thumping Good Read, New York Times Notable Book of the Year, couple of times Theakston's Old Peculier won and shortlisted, Scotland Magazine Icon of the Year, and I like this one, 2015 Dead Good Reader Awards, so I think that's good. Tonight she's here to talk about her latest work, her writing and her latest work, Insidious Intent. I'm also very delighted we have an interviewer here tonight. This is Stuart Kelly. He's a distinguished author, critic and journalist. His works include The Book of Lost Books, An Incomplete Guide to All the Books You'll Never Read, and Scotland, The Man Who Invented a Nation. He's also a literary editor of The Scotsman, writes for Scotland and Sunday, The Guardian and The Times, and has been a Man Booker Prize judge. So we're in very good literary company tonight, and I would be delighted if you welcomed them both to Motherwell.
Thank you very much indeed, and it's a delight to be back in Motherwell. I was here last year with Sophie and Hannah, and it was a lovely reception that we had here. And these festivals are so important, particularly when you're not in the Edinburghs and the Glasgows and the places that get so much of the cultural content. This is a very, very difficult event for me to do, because Val's new book is, I will say at the outset, absolutely staggering. But there is, in fact, I emailed her and said it was brilliant. I also used an adjective which ended in ing and began with F.
That's what you want your interviewer to say. Am I something wrong? Hello? Am I something?
I don't know if you are.
It's the one button.
Well,
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you want your interviewer to be saying about the book, frankly. Especially on the day when you haven't won the Nobel Prize.
Well, we won't mention who did. The thing about it is that there's an ending in this book which is so shocking and yet so necessary that Val has included a letter to the reader right at the end of it, for those of you who finished it, saying, please don't give away the ending. So, has anybody here actually read the book right the way through? We're not taking questions from you. I'll just be miffed, but she'll be angry, and we don't want to see that. The one question...
If I'm angry, it's not on my own account, it's actually because of my readers. I know that Tony and Carol have, I know from the letters and the tweets and the emails that I get, that over the years they've got a special place in a lot of my readers' hearts, and I don't want those readers who have followed the series this far to have the book spoiled for them because somebody can't just keep their mouth shut or wait till their friends have read it.
Can I ask a bit about that ending though? Because without giving anything away, as I said, it is completely unexpected. It is completely necessary and in character. If I were to channel Tony Hill for a moment, how long have you been planning this, Mr. McDermid?
Well, sitting here in the psychiatrist's chair, I actually consciously have been thinking about it since probably about 2/3 of the way through the previous book. Splinter the Silence. I've never had an overarching arc of the storyline for Tony and Carol. I never sat down at the beginning and said, I'm going to write 10 books, or 5 books, or 16 books, or 23 books. You know, I didn't sit down and like Sue Grafton with A is for Alibi and think, right, that's another 25 to go. And in fact, when I started writing Mermaid Singing, I intended it to be a standalone. I didn't have any life in mind for those characters beyond that first book. But the further I got into the book, and the further I delved into the ideas I had for the characters, it seemed to me that these were two people who I could write a lot more stories about because of their personalities, but also because of the jobs that they did, which are very particular and very distinct. You know, major crime and sexual homicide, the psychologist and the cop. It seemed to me that this was a partnership that could go on a lot further. So right from the beginning, it's always been book to book. Usually, when I come towards the end of one book, I start to get a sense of where they might go next, what the effects on them are going to be of what I've just done to them, which isn't generally very nice, and what kind of story they might find themselves sucked into next. So I guess I started thinking about the shape of this book towards the end of Splinter the Silence. It seemed to me this was, as you said, it seemed to me to be inevitable. It seemed to be there had to be an event of this scale.
I mean, it's inevitable. And when I was looking at the previous books, you could almost see the beginnings of the stirrings of what was going to happen quite a few books back. And yet, the ending is, I dropped the book. I just couldn't believe it.
I should say, by the way, that I have kept my promise. Neither of them ends up dead. I made that promise some time ago that I wouldn't kill either of them off, and I've stuck to that.
There are sort of differences in this, just to sort of scope out what's going on in this particular book. We have a killer who is leaving the bodies of women in burnt-out cars, in lay-bys, in parts of the moors. What's different about the particular killer in this instance is just how good they are at frustrating forensics.
I've written a lot about forensic science over the years. I mean, it's been something that, as my career has developed, so has forensic science. I wrote a non-fiction book about forensics. Yeah. I have very close working relationships and friendships with various forensic scientists. But one of the things that we've talked quite a lot about over the last few years in particular is the leapfrogging that goes on between criminals and the science. Something new is developed, the criminals find a way around it. Something else is developed, they find a way over it. And I thought it would be interesting to write a book where the killer is very forensically aware and has thought about every single step of the way, how to evade leaving traces, leaving things that are detectable. And coming up with some of that was quite challenging.
In what way?
Just finding a way around. One of the things that's particularly difficult to find your way around these days is the automatic number plate recognition system that operates on pretty much all the major roads. So that's one of the reasons why the cars are left, why the killings and the burning cars in the Yorkshire Dales National Park, because there's not much in the way of cameras there, and you can actually move about with a degree of impunity, for example. And there were other things about trace. That's why the bodies are burned in their own cars to destroy forensic traces. Fire is a great cleanser of crime scenes, and I've had some of my more interesting conversations about this book with my friend Val McDermid, who's Professor of Forensic Chemistry at Dundee University, expert in fire, explosives and drugs, though not generally all at the same time. And so I went off and sat down with Neve and I said, okay, I want to do something that will destroy the traces. And she said, well, fire in an enclosed space. So I said, well, it's like a car or a small which a car would be perfect. And also, it's about, with arson, it's amazing how much you can deduce from very small things So, for example, if you've lit a fire with a match, there will be enough residue left for the forensic chemist to tell you what brand of matches that you used. And whatever accelerant you use to start the fire leaves signature traces. You probably remember that fire a few years ago in Derby, where Mike Philpott set fire to his own house and accidentally, unintentionally burned 6 of his children alive. And one of the ways they caught him was there was residue of petrol on his underpants. And because of the additives that petrol companies add to the petrol, the forensic chemists were able to say which brand of petrol this was, and from that the police could go back and find which petrol station they'd actually bought the petrol at and tie him to the purchase of the petrol. So there's all these things that can lead you back. So I said to Niamh, we need an accelerant that isn't going to leave that kind of forensic trail. And she said, crisps. I said, what? She said, crisps. She said, a multi-pack of crisps will do it. And apparently a multi-pack of crisps will go up, whoosh, because of the oil in the crisps and because of the packaging. And it's a very, very good way to start a fire because it's a completely innocent thing to have in your car, a multi-pack of crisps. Not in my car anymore, I'll tell you that. And you get, because it's a confined space, you get what's called a flashover fire. And I didn't think these things, I didn't realise these things took hold so quickly. And Niamh showed me a video which took place it's a video that's taken in real time, and it's a living room. It's an ordinary living room, sofa, couple of chairs, television set, coffee table, and it's Christmas time. There's a Christmas tree in the corner, and somebody's lit a candle. And the candle sets fire to the branch of the Christmas tree. Within 45 seconds, the entire room is ablaze. It's what's called a flashover fire. And it's an unsurvivable event. If you're in that room, you don't get out within those 45 seconds, you're dead. And so this creates a very fast, very hot fire. So I thought, inside the car, you're going to destroy all the forensics. And that was one of the other challenges that Niamh helped me to overcome. So I thought it would be interesting to confront a team of detectives who are so accustomed now to being able to turn to the specialists for help and support and answers, to sort of throw them back, if you like, into the dark ages where they have to rely on their skills as detectives, interviewing people, doing the boring, tedious door-to-door stuff.
I thought that was the really interesting way in which it differed from Splinter the Silence, the previous novel. In Splinter, you had a lot of material about not just biological forensics, but digital forensics. Stacey Cheng was, I think, my favourite character in it in some ways. You know, this arch hacker turned good guy, good gal. In this book, it's the fact that time and time again, whether it's looking at the digital traces, whether it's looking at the biological results they hit brick walls, and what they're forced back onto is, as you say, the very boring legwork of checking out every single person at that wedding, all the connections they have, the connections that other people have. And you do have a speech in it where you say that, you know, there's one point where Carol begins to feel anxious that we've got so reliant on the experts, we've forgotten what policing is really about. You talk a bit about the decision to go to that edge of policing.
Well, I think increasingly policing has become about processes, about the forensics, it's about the bureaucracy. It's about how much money you've got in the budget to do particular things.
That's very, very interesting in terms of the way that at one point they pool things, not because they might get a result, but because the budgets are bad.
Yeah, and that's how it happens now, is that certain tests will not be done in certain cases because they're not deemed to be important enough or significant enough, and the money, the budget's tight, and they make the police will make a decision not to pursue a particular line of inquiry because it's not cost effective. And it's it then becomes a problem in the courtroom because juries expect to be given certain levels of forensic evidence, even if they're not necessary sometimes, but the jury expects that. So when that's not there, the jury start going, well, where's the DNA? Why isn't there evidence of this? Why isn't there evidence of that? And so all of these things become, I think, increasingly problematic for the business of law enforcement. We're lucky here in Scotland because we still have a forensic service that is run by the state, effectively. In England, trust me, it's much, much worse. Everything is done to the budget. And you have various private forensic companies doing the lab work. And it may well be that one company's cheapest for the DNA analysis, another company's cheapest for the fibre analysis, another company's cheaper for trace chemicals. And so you'll get a sample, an evidence sample, cut into 3 and sent to 3 different labs for analysis. And it's the pressures on the people working in these labs are tremendous to come up with the results in time and at the right level of cost. You shouldn't be running your legal system on the basis of how much it costs to do the tests you need to do to prove guilt. You know, there seems to me to be a kind of madness.
Although your books have always had a very precise relationship with the actual business of policing. And you know, one thing I loved about this book is the sort of slight harumph about, oh, I've got to trace down that person, I've got to trace down that person. You know, we've got to go do an interview in this supermarket, we've got to go and check out that person. There's always been an emotional core in it. And when we left Carol at the end of the last book, Splintered Silence, she's in quite a bad place, and you almost automatically make it worse for her.
I couldn't resist it, you know, because actions have consequences. You know, we always think we could outrun the past, but we never can. The past catches up with us.
But you know, you talk so eloquently about the research that you do in terms of the crisp packet being a wonderful accelerant. How do you research the kind of emotional damage that some of these people are going through? Whether it's the guilt, whether it's, in Carol's case, the fact that she's trying to kick the booze. How do you get into that mindset, as well as the specifics of the procedural aspects?
I talk to people. I eavesdrop on people. I listen to them on the train, on the bus. You know that moment when you're on your holidays and the couple next table are having an absolute banging row, and all sorts of stuff is coming out in the course of this row, and your partner's sitting there telling you something, and obviously you know what. Is that and I also spend quite a lot of my time listening when I'm in the car, or I listen to the radio a lot. And there's all sorts of fascinating stuff on the radio. People talking most intimately about their emotional or psychological experiences, things that have happened to them, and the effect it's had on their lives. And there's nothing better for a writer than to have the opportunity to listen in on that kind of intensity, that other people's experience, other people's joy and pain. That's all grist to the mill. You know, I soak it all up like a big fat sponge, and then when I need to access it, then I just cast my mind back and think, well, I remember listening to that woman who was talking about such and such a thing on Radio Scotland that afternoon. That's the kind of stuff that's meat and drink. I'd still go back shamelessly to my years as a journalist, way back at the start of my career. I mean, I stopped being a journalist in 1991, but I had 16 years of sitting in people's living rooms, listening to their tragedies and their joys and moments of sorrow and anguish and fear and delight, and that's all just filed away in the data set, and then you transform things in the process of imagination. You know, you examine things in your own life and the lives of the people closest to you, but you don't transfer that. It's not like an overlay. You don't map it directly onto what you're writing. You look at your own experience of a particular emotion, and then you give it to the character in the context of what's happening to them, which is often very different from anything that's ever happened to you. But you understand those basic sets of emotions.
I was going to ask a different question. Since you raised the fact that you were a journalist, there's a journalist in this book who's been in the previous books, who has something approaching a vendetta against Carol. And she's quite an ambiguous character, because she's not wholly wrong. She has a justifiable instinct that something has been manipulated. When you're writing that character, how much does that map onto the experience you had working on crime deaths, on local news? You know, that kind of combination of ambition and resentment and actual justice.
Well, I can't say that it's directly connected to what I did myself as a journalist, but I know that over the years you build up relationships with people you've written stories about again and again and again. Sometimes good stories, and then sometimes the good stories turn bad. And you have to be aware of the fact that the story comes first, the truth comes first, and that sometimes is very poisonous to relationships. I mean, the relationship with Carol and Penny Burgess goes right back to The Mermaid Singing, when basically they fell out because Penny Burgess thought Carol should, obey the rules of the sisterhood and share, and Carol was like, no, that's not how it works. So right from the start, there were those battle lines were drawn, and Carol is not somebody who, how can I put this, forgives people easily. She doesn't so much carry a grudge as sort of stuff it and wall mount it, and so in her eyes, Penny Burgess is a bad person, because she didn't just mess Carol up over the years, she's messed up Carol's colleagues over the years, and she doesn't forgive that very lightly. And yeah, I mean, there were I had relationships with some people over the years as a journalist, where sometimes you didn't have to write the story they didn't want you to write, and those relationships can be difficult and complicated. In my case, there were relationships with people more in the public eye, people involved in showbiz and that kind of thing, rather than criminals. So the consequences were not so awful, and those relationships could be rebuilt because there was a mutual benefit in those relationships. But they are complicated and they're hard. And I think, as a journalist, I always felt, and in the same way that I feel as a writer of fiction, you're always at the service of the story.
And yet, when you say that Carol bears a grudge and feels that a line has been crossed, Penny feels exactly the same, with just as much conviction and just as much justification.
For once, she's actually got the moral high ground. The journalist has the moral high ground, which is not a
very
common position.
Very rare. But I mean, do you self-consciously go out to think, I'm going to change the power dynamic here, I'm going to change who's in the right, who's in the wrong? Or is it just, as you say, in the service of the story that comes naturally?
Yeah, it's not that. I don't analyse these things very much when I'm actually writing.
That's why we have critics.
Well, it's also something you don't always. I think I'm not always conscious of it while I'm writing, and I'm not always conscious of underlying themes while I'm writing. I'm always driven by the story, the need to make the story work, and that also means making the characters work. The characters have to feel authentic in order for the story to work. Otherwise, you'd all turn off after page 20 and you go and read somebody else. So the whole thing has to be this marriage between story and character. And the story, I suppose, is the engine, and the character is what makes you want to read on. But if those things don't work, then the whole thing's a waste of time. And for me, those dynamics, those relationships, the tensions and the developments in relationships come about because I'm thinking about who these people are and how they got to be the person that they are. And given that those are the things that made you the person you are, then this is how you're going to react in this situation. So it is a dynamic thing going forward that I'm because of the things I have allowed my characters to do and be up to that point, what they do from here on in is also predefined in a way. They will behave in a particular way because that is the person they are, and that is how that person reacts in these situations.
I'm going to change the question I was going to ask again, because this is so fascinating. Famously,
fascinated by it.
Arthur Conan Doyle never reread a single Sherlock Holmes story when he had to write the next one. Which is why you've got things like the mystery of Watson's Wandering Wood, which turns up on his shoulder in A Study in Scarlet, which is in his leg in Henry Baskerville.
And his assorted wives.
And his assorted wives. In fact, her various and changing names. When you're starting the work on a book, how much do you have to go back to previous ones and think, okay, what have I laid down here as a kind of significant marker? Do you have to go back and look over The Mermaid Singing and think, well, what was pen like then?
I think it depends on, well, it depends on what aspect I suppose I'm thinking about developing most in this particular book, where I'm going with it. So I'll look back to the books that have, if you like, that backstory coming up to feed them. To look where they've come from in the books. So I'll skim various bits of books. I generally don't read a whole one again, but I skim chunks of them where I know that what I wrote there is kind of relevant to. It's more the emotional state, the psychological state, the state of mind of the character at that time that they went through. I am very, very fortunate in that I have the same copy editor that I had right back in the Mermaids Singing, and she is eagle-eyed, and she will say to me things like, "You can't do this because of the torment of others, you did this." That's when I've missed out a detail, or I've given somebody the wrong colour of eyes, or too many children, whatever, you know. She notices things like that. So in terms of the nuts and bolts, she saves me from a lot of the kind of disasters that you guys would pick up on. But generally speaking, I go back and I skim, and I kind of feel my way back in, rather than immerse myself totally. But I mean, I have some amazing readers out there. I mean, on my Twitter feed, people have been saying things like, I'm rereading the whole Tony and Carol series before I read Insidious Intent. And you think, I've not made that many mistakes.
if Gustav Flaubert could get away with it in Madame Bovary, where her eyes change colour 3 times. You know,
But people notice these. People do notice things, and I mean, you get some great letters from readers. I remember when I was writing the Kate Brannigan series, which is set in Manchester, and there was one. I got this letter from a reader saying, "I've just read the latest Kate Brannigan novel, which I liked very much. However, Kate drives down Oxford Road and turns right into Chester Street, and at the time of writing, that was valid. However, since the book was published, the traffic system has been changed, and you can no longer turn right into Chester Street. You may wish to change this for the paperback." No. Then she'll end up completely the wrong place.
You know, it is called fiction for a reason.
Exactly, yes. In my universe, you can still turn right on Chester Street.
I don't think it would be unfair to say that there is a political agenda to some extent in these books. The way in which Carol has built up her team for the remit unit, you know, it is diverse. There is a strong sense of, I mean, one of my favourite bits, and it's just a grace note in the book, is when Carol is so annoyed at being called Ma, and says, you know, that's actually done to undermine you, not to show respect. How much is that to the forefront of your mind when you're writing these?
I wouldn't say it's to the forefront of my mind, but it's part of my consciousness. I think all writers reflect their own concerns in their work, and the degree to which they're concerned with the world that they live in. Some writers seem to be not very much concerned with anything beyond what happens outside their own front door, and some writers are profoundly engaged with the wider social picture. And I think I come somewhere, you know, towards the more engaged end of the. I listen to the news. I read newspapers. I read more than one newspaper online most days. I'm interested in the dynamic of public life. I'm interested in political systems. I've got a 60-year-old son who's obsessed with political systems at the moment and tends to ask me, before I've even had my first cup of coffee, what went wrong with Julius Nyeri's dream of Pan-African socialism in the 1960s? Ask me after the second cup, son. But I'm engaged with the world around me, and so that feeds its way into the books. You know, it's not a deliberate sitting down and saying, this is the book where I'm going to talk about homelessness, or this is the book where I'm going to talk about we need to change the drug laws. But things things come in because they have tangents with the story that I'm writing, or because they have tangents with the characters that I'm writing. They're the kind of things that my character would care about, or not, as the case may be. And so they find their way in, and I don't, as I said, I don't sit down with an agenda. I don't have an agenda for the books in that sense. But because I am me, and these are my concerns, they find their way into the books. You know, I think, you know, really and truly, how can you listen to the Today programme in the morning and not start your day in a condition of rage? There's always something outrageous.
One of the things which has been in the news increasingly, and which comes into this novel as a subplot of quite great significance to the emotions of the characters, is the idea of online blackmail with young people being encouraged to send compromising pictures of themselves. And I thought you dealt with that with immense subtlety and rigour. Who was actually in the wrong? Who could, the very fact that the person who had sent the pictures and was being blackmailed had themselves committed a crime. That's a very, very complex issue to have to deal with. And I wonder how much did you have to sit down and think, hang on, what do I really think about this issue before transforming it into the plot, which is so important, how some of the characters are going to interrelate to each other?
Yeah, I was quite a long way into thinking about that plot, that subplot, before I realised that I needed to do something that turned it around to make it interesting and not just predictable and not the way these things are. I wanted to convey the full extent of the sort of horror and the fear and the completely undermining experience of having this done to you. You know, a young person, you suddenly find your whole life is about to be put in the shredder if you can't come up with some money that you don't have, just because you got carried away late one night in your bedroom online. And you probably remember a couple of years ago now, when a young guy from Dunfermline threw himself off the Forth Bridge because he was being blackmailed in precisely this way. And the extent to which these incidents really profoundly disrupt young people's lives, I find offensive, and I'm just outraged that anybody would think that's a reasonable thing to do. So I guess that's another example of things that make me outraged, and finding a way of putting that in a book in such a way that hopefully people will find it interesting and the storyline quite tense, and then when that resolves itself, maybe think again about some of the assumptions that you make about that as well.
Do you think your books change people's minds?
I don't know.
You get a lot of emails and letters and things. Have you had ones which say, I used to think this about an idea, but this has actually changed what I think?
I have had one or two like that, yeah. I mean, my aim really, I want to write books that I just want to write the kind of books I like to read. And I like reading books that leave me some space at the end of the book for my own thoughts, for my own reactions to the characters. I like that feeling of what happens next to these people. What can they do after these things that have happened to them? Where will their lives go? How can they factor these things into their lives going forward? But also to think about the issues in the book. And sometimes, sometimes we read books that do change the way we think. We end up reading a book that has a character whose position or whose views are kind of at an angle to what we hold as absolutely right and obvious. And you do go away and think again about things. So if people come away from our books and have a wee thought about the things that they believe and their opinions, their prejudices, whatever, then that's good. I think one of the ways in which my books have certainly changed people's views is by writing about gay and lesbian people. I've had various people coming up to me over the years saying, I'd never read a lesbian book before, but I really liked that, and it was really good. So in that sense, I suppose it's changed people's perspectives.
I've just got one question before I open it up to the floor, which you said to me beforehand that you are working on an introduction to a novel which many people here probably won't have heard of, Susan Ferrier's Marriage, which is a 19th century novel. It's a woman who was certainly in the shadow of the Walter Scotts and the James Hoggs and the John Gauls. What does it give you to be able to sort of take a book like that and bring it back into the world?
It's very satisfying to be able to draw people's attention to something that's been ignored, forgotten, whatever. Susan Ferrier, the marriage, next year it's 200 years since it was first published, and in her lifetime she outsold Jane Austen. She got advances for her books where Jane Austen had to pay for her own books to be published. Susan Ferrier was formally translated into French at a time when the only Jane Austen books you could get were pirated ones. So she had that huge popularity. She was a good writer, and yet she just kind of fell out of people's consciousness. Now, I'm not entirely sure why that was. I think there's sometimes a feeling that we've got a good woman writer, we've got Jane Austen, we've got a Scottish writer, we've got Walter Scott. We don't need another one. It's like when I worked in newspapers back in the 1980s. I remember having a conversation with my editor. One of my colleagues was leaving, and we had a very good Saturday Casual reporter who happened to be a woman. And I said, if we don't give her a job, somebody else will. And my editor looked at me sort of blankly and said, but we've already got a woman. and I do sometimes wonder if that's kind of what happens in the world of literary excellence. Like in the 1920s when it was like, we've got Virginia Woolf, Agatha, away you go and write a crime novel. There's a certain sense of the women could do the genre, but the literature was for the men. And I think that's part of what it is. But there's we're doing a big project in Edinburgh in January, which hopefully will also help to remind people of Susan's existence.
It's so encouraging that this is happening now. I mean, the fact that we now have Mary Somerville, one of the earliest science writers on the £10 note, we've got Nan Shepherd on the £5 note. A few more statues would be good. But
more statues of dogs than women in Edinburgh. The one of them actually is one of my favourite statues. It's in the entrance to Princess Street Gardens at the far end. It's a tribute to a dog from San Diego called Bum.
Who'd like to kick off the question for Val? I know it's always difficult with the first person, but there's somebody in the front row here. If you just...
You have time to read, when you do that, but anyway. Do you read out with your own genre?
Do you read out of your own genre, just so that everyone can hear?
Yes, I do. I mean, I read a lot of crime fiction. Some of it work related because every year I chair the New Blood panel at the Harrogate Crime Writing Festival. So I have to pick 4 debut novelists. So that means reading a lot of first novels. But I also read a lot of literary fiction, general fiction. My interest is in people who are good storytellers and write well. So that's not limited to any one genre. It goes across science fiction, it goes across literary fiction, which is just another genre after all. So I'm always on the hunt for so people I know are good storytellers. So this morning I was very excited when the postman brought my copy of Alan Hollinghurst's new book, which I started reading on the train. So it's people who engage me with their ability to weave a narrative filled with people that I want to spend time with.
Let's take another from the floor now that we've broken the ice.
Right, I have already read the book, but I would like to know if you say that halfway through the book you're thinking about the next one. So have you already thought about a sequel to this one?
Knew that was going to come up.
Yeah, I expect that. I fully intend there to be more Tony and Carol books. But next year's book will be another Karen Pirie. And probably the book after that will be a standalone, because I've got this great idea for a standalone, and it's like burning a wee hole in the back of my brain. And then I fully expect to be returning to Tony and Carol in one form or another.
Is there a difference when you're doing standalones? I mean, does that have to be a different impetus?
Yeah, things always start with story. With me, it always starts with an idea for a story, and it can start with something quite small. It can be an anecdote somebody tells me, something I hear on the radio, something I read in a newspaper feature, or a couple at next sunbed having an argument, whatever. Things set off in my head, thinking, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. Or what if they believed him instead of her? And start question mark, and then the what if game starts. And then I start to find out bits and pieces of information that fit in with that subject. Gradually, a story starts to take shape, and I know right away when it starts to take its shape, whether it's going to fit with one of the series characters or it's something completely different. And if it's one of the series characters, if it's the kind of story that Tony and Carol can tell, then immediately I have to think about the limitations of what I can do with them. You know, Tony isn't suddenly going to turn into an action hero leaping tall buildings with one mighty bound or anything like that, you know.
Seems fairly brave and split to the silence at the end of it.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, the idea of him as the sort of, you know, the guy who punches his way through a story like Jack Reacher ain't gonna happen. You know? So you've got your set characters in a series novel with their abilities and their limitations. So the story has to work within those. So that becomes quite a strong conditioning factor in how you can tell the story. But with the standalone, because you've got a completely blank canvas, you can let the story run riot in your head before you have to start thinking about whose story is this, who can tell this story, who are the people who matter in the story, how did they get to be the way they are, why would you behave like this, why would you behave like that, what drives you to do that, why would you even be interested in investigating? So all those questions start to buzz in my head, and I get the fun of making up a whole new gang to play with.
Let's take another question from the floor. If you keep your hand right up.
Where is Bradfield?
Well, Bradfield is like Brigadoon. It doesn't actually exist, but except for a publication day every other year, when it appears somewhere on the moors between Lancashire and West Yorkshire. And it's round about where Todmorden is, but it's a city, and it has its own spur off the M62. When I wrote Mermaid Singing, I was still living in Manchester, and at the time, Manchester's Chief Constable, James Anderton, was a man noted for his petty vindictiveness and his bigoted nature and his self-righteousness. He was a man who once described the victims of AIDS as swimming around in a cesspit of their own making. A man of absolutely no charm whatsoever. I knew that Mermaid Singing was going to be critical of the police, and I thought I would be taking a bit of a risk to be overly critical of Greater Manchester Police in print, and feared that I might get nicked for speeding every time I took the car in. And so I created Bradfield, and having created Bradfield, I felt I was kind of stuck with it. It never feels quite as rooted as a real place does in my head, but it does have the great advantage of being entirely susceptible to whatever I want to give it. So, you know, when I wanted to write about a football team, I just gave it Bradfield Victoria, that very successful Premiership side.
You do have a lot of fun in this book with some of the names of the sort of small hamlets and, you know, rural points outside. I mean,
but
they're so convincing, and yet you know the whole time.
Yeah, I did play a lot with the names of North Yorkshire, place names of North Yorkshire, which are largely Viking in their origin. And so, although what I've done is mashups of two different villages and turned them into one sort of hamlet or whatever. So I've had a lot, you know, places like Snazeset and Burterbusk. And just like if you look at a Northern survey map by the time of the Yorkshire Dales, it's just like these ridiculous names. And yes, there are times when you can have a wee bit of fun.
Can we take somebody further back? Yes.
When you read other people's work, can you do it purely for pleasure, or are you always analysing the style and what?
It's a very good question. I think if you're a writer, every time you pick up somebody else's book, you're always aware that there's things to be learned, things to be noticed. And I often say to the aspiring writers that you learn more from a bad book than you do from a good book sometimes. If you read a bad book, you just go, never going to do that. But it is I will say, that you know, sort of 30 years of being a published writer has made me a much more critical reader, and that does often diminish the pleasure. And I have become, it goes against all my sort of Presbyterian upbringing, but I have become someone who doesn't finish books. If they're doing my head in, if I'm not enjoying it, if it's not taking me anywhere, I don't finish it. And that was a really hard thing for me psychologically to start doing. But I would say probably, maybe, if I'm lucky, half a dozen times in a year, a book will just suck me in completely, and I'm not noticing anything about the author's technique or what they're doing with the prose style or how the cleverness of what they're doing with the structure, and I'm just completely in the world of that book.
What was the last one?
What was the last one? Well, that's the kind of question where your mind almost goes complete blank. It was probably the Sebastian Barry.
Always.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. Was it these? What's that? Rubbish with titles. The new Sebastian Barry, the one that won the Costa.
Won the Costa.
Won the Costa. Yeah. It's just absolutely wonderful. Completely sucked me in, and I didn't want to put it down. You know, I think when you just want to be awake for another hour, but your eyes are closing, and the book is smiting you in the face. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful read.
Let's take another
Do you read
question.
other detective writers like them?
Yeah, I do. I read a lot of crime writers. You know, I would say Denise Miner is one of my favourite crime writers. She's a wonderful, wonderful writer. There's lots of. Well, I think we're playing sort of new platinum age of crime writing at the moment. There's some stunningly good crime fiction going out there.
And it's very
Graham McRae Burnett, his Bloody Project, wonderful. Abir Mukherjee, A Rising Man. These are new Scottish writers coming through. Mary Paulson Ellis, the other Mrs. Walker. Some great stuff out there.
It seems strange that we sort of lump lots of books together as crime, when there seems as many differences between them as there are similarities. You know, there's going to be a crime. If you're reading something like Katrina McPherson, it might be that the Duchess's diamonds have been pilfered during a dinner party. If you're reading something like Stuart McBride, it's going to be there's some absolutely horrendous psychopath that you can't quite believe. Do you think it's a problem that we put all these books together and call them crime and don't sort of be more subtle about the different forms that this form can take?
Well, I don't know. I think the opposite is the case. Really, we should just call them all books, novels.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
good point.
it's,
Well made.
you know, I don't particularly differentiate between what I read in crime fiction. There are people who are extremely talented writing all sorts of crime fiction. There's people who are extremely talented writing all sorts of different fiction. And I have problems with that sort of narrow sort of cutting things up into this is the kind of book you will like because you like that book. And you get these horrible publishing trends, you know. 3 or 4 years ago it was Nordic noir. You know, if somebody didn't have a funny line through the middle of their O, then you weren't going to read them, you know.
So when are you doing a book with the girl with the title?
Well, that's what followed it, was The Girls, wasn't it? I mean, I'm threatening to write the girl on the bus for Les Mexico. And, you know, we've had domestic noir, so who knows what it'll be next. But I think these things are so we have corralling readers. And publishers are great ones for bandwagons. You know, if there's a trend, then they try to capture your money by publishing another 20 novels that they say, just like Gone Girl, just like The Girl on the Train. But, you know, there usually pale limitations.
It's that old publishing thing about, that's new and interesting, now go and do it again.
Yeah.
Let's take another couple of points, if there are some. Oh, again?
I heard Ken Follett on television the other day saying that he found doing the research more interesting than writing the book. Does that ring a bell with you?
Not really. I mean, but then I don't like the kind of research-heavy work that he does. I mean, he writes a very different kind of book. I sometimes find having to do the research quite tedious. I want to get on with writing the book, but there are things. Sometimes the research can be very seductive, and it draws you in, and you get deeper and deeper into the research, and you actually lose sight of the book you're trying to write. I wrote a book some years ago called The Grave Tattoo, which is set against William Wordsworth and Fletcher Christian, Mutiny on the Bounty. It's a present-day thriller, but it draws on the events of 200 years before. And my editor said, you're obviously going to have to do a lot of research for this, so I'll give you an extra 6 months to write it. And I just spent 6 months getting buried deeper and deeper. Every book would lead me to another book. Every person I spoke to would lead me to another person. And by the end of it, I knew so much about the lives of William Wordsworth, so much about Fletcher Christian, and so much about the Bounty and what happened in the aftermath. I couldn't see the book anymore. I really almost had to rinse my brain and just go like, you know, don't look at your notes. Rely on what you remember and then go back and check. afterwards, it was the only way I could do it because I'd gone too much into it, and I said I'd lost sight of the story almost.
I won't say which author the person was referring to, but I remember one critic saying to me, "Oh, that person never met a fact they didn't like." It is difficult, the research. You will jettison 70% of all the research you do for it.
Oh, at least. And I mean, even the greats fall into that trap. I mean, I bow to no one in my respect for Margaret Atwood, but the one book that I just felt like I really struggled with was Alias Grace. I really felt Margaret Atwood had discovered everything there was to know about the life of a serving woman in Canada in the 19th century, and by God, she was going to tell us. and so even the best of us get seduced by the glory of information that I've got and nobody else knows yet.
Can we take one final question? Yes?
What do you think about the TV series Where in the Blood?
I was very well served by the TV series. I think Coastal Productions and Robson Green as Tony Hill did a very good thing. I mean, they did it out of respect for the books as well. I mean, at the heart of the series right at the beginning was a faithfulness to the world of the books. And we sat down right at the beginning and talked about the elements that were important in terms of character and stories and the kind of stories you could tell. And then I basically said to them, go away and make the best television you can. You have to let go. But I think they did a really good job. And I think if you watched the television and then came to the books, you didn't have that terrible sense of dislocation that you sometimes get, and also vice versa. If you read the books in London, you weren't going to have your dream destroyed by the television series.
It's a very difficult thing, that, because, I mean, towards the end of the great late Colin Dexter's Morse books, you did feel he was writing John Thornhill, and he wasn't actually writing the original Morse that I remember reading those books at the outset. And you seem to have kind of sidestepped that whole question very elegantly.
Well, I just carried on writing the books I was going to write anyway. I mean, I learned a valuable lesson from Reg Hill's experience with D'Ellen Pascoe. When the people who made D'Ellen Pascoe decided very soon that they didn't want Ellie Pascoe because she was inconvenient and got in the way of this sort of, the detective duo kind of relationship. And so they basically said, we're writing out Ellie Pascoe. And Reginald Hill's riposte to this was that the next book he wrote was Arms and the Women, which was all about Ellie. He said, let them adapt that one.
We're just about out of time, but if you did have other questions, please come over and speak to Val when you buy a copy of the book. I can't commend it highly enough. It is an astonishing continuation of what has been a remarkable series, and I am going to give you all a spoiler. Despite Val saying that there is practically capital punishment for spoilers, Tony gets a purple anorak. He does. It's wonderful. Please join me in thanking Val McDermid.
It's been a great insight into, a writer, not just a crime writer, and as you as a reader. And thank you to Stuart as well for his very well-informed interview. Thank you all for coming. As Stuart was saying, the books will be on sale at a discount. Over there at a discount. It's the latest book. It's for sale in a table around the corner, and Val will sign them for you. There's lots of bits of paper on your seat. We put out feedback forms. We really do appreciate your feedback every year. We find library customers are very good at giving us their feedback. We do use it in planning future events. So we're very grateful if you fill those out. There's also details about other things coming up. Book Week Scotland is at the end of November, and we're still planning our programme, but there's quite a lot there already. Okay, so could we give another round of applause?